When working with React Native navigation, you can also listen to some events during the navigation, and we will need such an event to actually open our site drawer. I'm in Share Place in our Share Place component, and to listen to such an event, we simply have to set up a listener, which I first of all do by adding a constructor to this component. In this constructor, I will get the props, and first of all, we always have to call super props to execute the parent constructor. And then I can reach out to this props navigator, and there we actually have a set on navigator event method, where we specify a method that should be executed whenever some navigation event occurs. So I'm going to add this method here. You can name the method whatever you want. I'll name it on navigator event. I will get the event here, and I'll use the modern syntax of using a property where I assign an arrow function. So there I get the event. And let's first of all simply log this. And we can use the debugger to see what's inside of it. Now I need to assign this, so I'll bind this on navigator event. And since I use this modern syntax of using this property with arrow function style, I don't need to bind this. If you would use the other method syntax where you don't have the equal sign and don't use the arrow function, you would have to bind this. That's just a side note though. So we added this to Share Place. So let's go back to our app and make sure that we actually debug this remotely. And since I just want to see the console log, I simply opened the debugger in Chrome here, click on Login. And now let's click on Share Place. I'll clear the console before I do that. And you see these outputs here. These are all coming from Share Place line 15. If we have a look at line 15, that's our console log statement where we log the event. These are the various navigator events. You see one was bottom tab selected. One was screen changed, and the ID was will appear and did appear. So you got lifecycle hooks here too. Will appear right before a screen is loaded, did appear after it was loaded. You find more about the available events here on the official documentation under Screen API, all the way down there to listen visibility events. There you see will appear, will disappear, and did disappear. These are independent of the normal lifecycle hook of your components, because the React Native Navigator will actually cache some of your components in some circumstances. So component did mount might not actually be executed, will appear and did appear will run though. So these are the best places to use if you need to run something whenever a screen becomes visible. But how does this help us with the site drawer now? The site drawer also emits an event, or the button emits one. Watch the log on the right, I clean it, if I tap this menu button. You see, we got an event of type navbar button press with an ID of null. So we want to listen to that to know that one of our navbar buttons was pressed. Now all we need to do additionally is give one of the buttons, or this button here, an ID which then occurs here, which allows us to find out which button was pressed. It's easy here, of course, but if we had multiple buttons, this would allow us to clearly identify the button which was pressed. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my start main tabs file, and there where I register my buttons, next to icon and title for the menu button, I'm going to add the ID property, and I'm going to give this ID of site drawer toggle. You can use any ID you want. I'm going to assign this for both the buttons because they're the same button. They're handling the same button just on different pages. Now we got all the pieces we need. In the Share Place file, we now get this event. And in here, we now simply have to check if it's an event of type navbar button press, and then check the ID. So first of all, I'll check if event type, you just saw in the console that this exists, this property. If it's equal to navbar button press, here, that's this event. And if it is, we know that a navigation button was pressed. Now we only have one, but in case we had more than one, I'll check the ID. and I'll see if it's equal to site drawer toggle, the ID I just set up here in the start main tabs file. Inside this if block, I then know that it's safe to open the site drawer because we really pressed this button. So now we can reach out to props, navigator, and there we actually have a toggle drawer method. You can also find this in the documentation, of course. It's all very well documented here, toggle drawer. You can configure this, for example, to say, I only want to open it. If it's open, don't close it upon a button press. If you don't specify the to prop here as a configuration, it would actually do a real toggle and open it if it's closed and close it if it's opened. You can define if it should be animated and where the drawer is coming in. Now here I'm going to pass some configuration. I'm going to set the site to left, which you need to do to avoid errors on Android, which would otherwise fail. I won't set any other options. And now with that, let's reload our app here on iOS. Let's go there and click this button. Looks fine. Now if we try it on Android, there chances are high it won't work. It's a little bug, but it's easy to fix, thankfully, if you know how to fix it. But I'll tell you. You need to go to your site drawer and you need to explicitly set a width on it. For that, I'll first of all import something from React Native, into which I'll dive deeper into styling section. It's dimensions. It's a helper object, which allows us to dynamically find out the dimensions of the device we're running on. Then on the view which wraps my drawer, so to say, I'll set the style to an object where we need to set the width. That's required. And then you use dimensions. There you get the window dimensions. Window is a string here. There you access the width. This gives you the width of the current window. And you multiply it with 0.8, for example. The value is up to you. This will take 80% of the current window. That if you then reload your app on Android, now you should be able to click this button and get a drawer. Now as you see, it has no background, so it doesn't have the default styling which you do have on iOS. So therefore, I'll add a style sheet to it here to give this drawer some styling, but we'll do this in the next lecture.